you participants for being with us this afternoon, early evening. So my name is Raymond Kwong. I am an advocate with Disability Rights California, and today I have with me Leilani Pfeiffer. She and I will be supporting our presenter today, Paula Tobler. Just a real quick overview of our services. Disability Rights California, we are a statewide nonprofit agency, and we provide free legal services to people with disabilities with any disability-related issues. We have offices statewide, with our headquarters being in Sacramento. We have attorneys and advocates who can handle a variety of issues, from access or discrimination issue with housing, with transportation, employment accommodation issues, special education, higher education. We can also help with public health benefits such as Medi-Cal, in-home supportive services, and Social Security overpayment issue that relates to work. And within our agency, we have separate programs such as our excuse me, Office of Client Rights Advocacy, or OCRA. They specialize in helping clients of the regional center, and our Client Assistance Program, which specialize in helping clients of the Department of Rehab. So everything you see today, presentation, links in the chat, everything will be shared with you after the presentation, along with the recording, of course. And I am going to formally introduce our presenter today. Paula currently works as a supervising attorney at Disability Rights California in the Pathways to Work practice group. She came to DRC from private practice as a labor and employment attorney, specifically because of her interest in employment opportunities and reasonable accommodations for mental health disabilities. Since becoming a member of the California Bar 30 years ago, she has practiced law in many different subject areas. She attributes her current career path to being in a major auto accident 22 years ago. They gave her personal experience with traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress disorder, carrying these diagnoses and seeing the disparity between what she can do with little to no accommodation and what others assume she can do based on misconceptions of her diagnosis, lit a fire in her to educate and advocate for others in similar circumstances. So without further ado, Paula, I will pass the mic to you and begin the presentation.
Thank you, Raymond. So as Raymond just said, I work in reasonable accommodations, more often in employment than higher education, but higher education is a path to employment and very important. And I also have lived experience as a person with disabilities, and I also have children with disabilities and siblings with disabilities. So it's been kind of a life mission to see how the world treats people with disabilities and try to make it a more friendly place for people with disabilities. So that's why I'm here and enjoy what I do. I'm going to start with talking a little bit about services that I work with the CAP program, which is for DOR, Department of Rehabilitation. Actually, they're not the Department of Rehabilitation anymore. They just changed their name, but it's been so new that I can't even remember what their new name is. But the formerly known as DOR clients that pertain to education, to higher education, because a lot of times what we find is people have got misinformation and maybe are missing out on some services that could get them higher education. And then we'll go into the reasonable accommodations in higher education once you get to school. Okay, next slide. This session is to provide you with general information only. Please do not share your personal information or questions during this training. This session is not confidential. If you do have questions, you can hold them till the end and we will have a question and answer session. But even then, please keep them general. We cannot keep your information private or confidential, and we don't want you to put something, especially if it's going to be recorded and put out on YouTube or anything else that would provide information that other people aren't entitled to. On the other hand, we will give you our contact information so you can call us to ask more personal questions one-on-one if you want to. Next slide. Okay, higher education and training. Next slide. What is training? So in the Department of Rehabilitation terms, training can be a lot of different things. It can be skill development, apprenticeships, certificate programs, vocational adjustment, general education diploma or a GED, vocational training, an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, advanced degrees, continuing education credits. All of those things can come under the higher education and training components that the DOR can help pay for if you are a person with disabilities in the state of California. Okay, next slide. So what we hear a lot is, can the DOR help me with training? And the answer is yes. And just to tell a little personal story, since I've been doing this work, I talk to a lot of people in my real life. I do end up having a lot of people with disabilities in various circles because that's so much a part of my life. And I am surprised at how many people either have not heard of the DOR or did not realize the help they could get with training. So I hear all the time, you know, I don't want to do this job, or even when I get reasonable accommodation in employment requests, they're like, you know, this is really a really bad job for my disabilities. I really wish I could do something else, but I just can't afford to go back and get my master's degree or something like that. And I said, well, have you heard of the DOR? They have no idea. So that opens up really a lot of possibilities. So the DOR will pay for training when it is needed for your employment goal. So for example, one of these people I was talking to had really always wanted to be a therapist, but would need a master's in social work or a master's in like counseling psychology to do that. But if the employment goal is to be a therapist, a licensed clinical social worker can do therapy, then a master's in social work is part of that. And that person is now actually in a master's in social work program that the DOR is paying for. So the employers can require the training for your goal. If she were to apply for jobs as a therapist, they would require her to have that education. So it would be required for that employment goal. Or if you need certain skills in order to do the job. So let's say you have the education, but you have some skill sets you need. That can also help you with that. All right, next slide. So for this example, Jenny here loves coding. She wants to find a job as a computer programmer. Most employers require computer programmers have a bachelor's degree. Can the DOR help Jenny go to college? You can like do the little raise your hand signal if you want, or you can just wait and I'll answer. Yes, the DOR can. So if you were thinking yes or saying yes, oh, Disability Works California is the name. Thank you, Lonnie. The DOR is now Disability Works California. So yes, the DOR or DWC, I guess, DWC, Disability Works California, can help Jenny go to college because most employers, even if not all of them, but most employers require a bachelor's degree in order to get that job. Next slide. Okay, so how do you know if you need training for your goal? You can go to ONET online or the Occupational Outlook Handbook. You can look at job postings where they say what the requirements are to apply for the job, or to state licensing boards like the people who license therapists, for example. Okay, next slide. Okay, so how can the DOR help me when I'm in school? So one of the biggest benefits is tuition, because that's expensive. But that's not all the keep wanting to say DOR, DWC can pay for. They can also pay for fees, parking fees, for example, for books, for supplies, for a laptop if you need a computer for your schooling and you don't have one, transportation, tools, equipment. If you have a class that has a lab, for example, or you need certain software or statistics software or something like that, they can help with that. Assistive technology, uniforms, tutors, personal assistance services, maintenance, and other services you might need. So if you are in school, and when we're going to talk about reasonable accommodations later on, this will come into play because a lot of times what you'll find is you need something for school. You're in college, you need tutors, note takers, something like that. You go to the school and ask them for that as an accommodation, and they say, well, we'll let you have that, but we won't pay for it. Sometimes you can get the DOR to pay for it. So you want to make sure that you understand that these are also a source of payments for things that you need as accommodations if your school is pushing back on doing that. Same thing with assistive technology. These are things that maybe would help you, but they're not going to pay for, but they will allow you to use them. See if the DOR or DWC can help pay for them. Okay. And if you're not sure, you can always ask. Right. Next slide. And I don't know if any of you are not, have I not already looked into the Disability Works California, but if you have not, it doesn't hurt to go ahead and apply. It's free, and you can find out how they can help you. Okay, do I need to attend full time? No, you do not. This is one where sometimes even the rehabilitation counselors get confused, and they might pressure people to go to school full time. It is expected that you will attend full time if you can, but there are very many disabilities that make it difficult to go full time. And if that's the case, you can request to go part time and have them pay for you to be in school longer going part time due to your disability. So you can request part time as a reasonable accommodation for your disability through the Disability Works California. And under the Americans with Disabilities Act, agencies like the DOR that get federal funding have to make changes in their policies so that you can participate in services that they are needed because of your disability. So think of that in a lot of different ways when you're dealing with these agencies. We see that a lot also in communication plans and in other ways where if you need something specifically done a certain way because of your disability, you can ask for it as an accommodation if that allows you to access their services better. So always be thinking if you're having trouble, whether it's in school or with the DOR or DWC. And schools receive federal funding as well, including private schools, because they will take loans and grants and stuff. So these are both entities that are required to provide accommodations in order to provide you services. So be thinking in terms of like, if I'm struggling, is it because of my disability? And is there something that can be provided to me to make it easier? All right, next slide. This one comes up a lot because a lot of times people will have an idea of where exactly they want to go to school, and there might be pushback of that. So in order to approve the school that you want to go to, the DOR must consider the cost, the availability of the training program that is related to your employment goal, your individual needs, if there would be substantial delays or it would take a long time to complete your program at one school and a much shorter time at another. Or you can also look into the school's accommodation practices. Now, this one is really important. If you haven't already chosen a school to go to, but you're looking at schools, you can apply to different schools. You've maybe been accepted to different schools and are trying to decide which one to accept. Look at the school's accommodation practices because they vary greatly. So some schools are very good about providing accommodations and some are not. You will find that a lot of the university campuses have disabled student groups. And you can go to those student groups. Like if you ask the college, of course they're going to say, oh yes, we provide accommodations. We're great with students with disabilities, whether that's true or not. But if you can access the disabled students group on campus and ask them whether it's been easy or hard for them to get accommodations, you might get a better idea. Sometimes the DOR or Disability Works California has an idea too, because they work with students in all of these different universities and they can have an idea sometimes of which ones are more likely to give accommodations or not. But that is an important consideration when you're a person with disabilities going to college. So it's not just their reputation as a university, but also think about their reputation as a university providing accommodations and assistance to students with disabilities. Okay. Next one. Okay, the DOR will pay for the least expensive option that meets your needs and is available to you. So generally they're looking at community college rates. So they might have you do 2 years at a community college. If that's not enough, you need a 4-year program. You can do transfer to public college. There are a lot of problems with transferring community college credits into 4-year universities now, even within the UC and state systems. So look into that, and if it actually would be more problematic, you might be able to argue to get just straight into a 4-year program and have them pay for the whole thing instead of starting you out at community college. So they're going to start with the least expensive option. That's their mandate because they're spending taxpayer money, but there are ways for you to argue if that's not the appropriate thing for them to do, that you're not always going to be stuck with the cheapest option like community college. There are also a lot of programs where community college is actually the best option. So even if they, weren't the cheapest, they'd be the best. So just look at what your particular situation is. All right, next slide. Do you need to help to pay for the training? No, not usually. So as long as you're attending the least expensive school available to you, the DOR will pay for it. However, if you choose to go to a more expensive school, you will have to pay the difference in the cost. So let's say you are accepted into, one of the Cal State schools, but you really, really want to go to a private school. That doesn't mean that you have to pay the entire private school and you get no DOR services, but if you don't have sufficient reason for them to pay for private school tuition, they will pay the same rate as your state school option, and then you just pay the difference. So you might have to pay for part of the training. Okay, next slide. You do need to apply for it and use any free money that's available to you. So they will make you fill out the FAFSA and show it to them. If you get financial aid and grants, you have to put forth maximum effort to get financial aid and grants. That helps to take away from what the DOR is paying for your schooling. But if you get scholarships, like merit-based scholarships, you don't have to use it to pay for tuition unless your school requires it. So sometimes people can get a merit-based scholarship and be able to use that for other costs that the DOR does not pay for. If you get different types of funding and you're not sure how, what the DOR can subtract from their end and what you can use for other things, you can always call Disability Rights California, because we do have the CAP program, which is a consumer advocate program for DOR clients. So we can help you figure out what should be done with that money. Okay, next slide. Also, if you think you are entitled to private school and they're only paying for public school, you can also call Disability Rights California, and we can help you figure that out and advocate for you if we believe that you also have a right to private school or to a more expensive option. Okay, when you choose to go to private school, you usually pay the difference in the cost. However, the DOR may pay the full cost of private school if the cost is less than a public school, which sometimes happens, not usually, but sometimes. If the training you need is not available at a public school, especially if it's not available at a public school near you, unless like it's available at a public school that's not near you, but maybe has an online program. But if it would require you to move, across the state or something, then you can argue, I can go to a private school here rather than, go across the state to a public school, then I should get the private school rates. If a private school is better able to meet your needs, which includes accommodation needs, or if attending a public school would delay your progress or take longer than a private school. So for example, we have a case right now that's ongoing where this person, there is no public school near where she lives that has the program that she needs. They have one that's kind of similar, but it's a 2-year program where a lot of the classes are things that have been really hard for her in the past because of her disability and will not get her closer to her particular goal. but she has to take all of them because of the way the program is set up. Or she can go to a private school that focus specifically on what she needs for her employment goal and will get her out in something like 6 or 8 months. So she's looking at a fraction of the time and everything focused on that and not having to take classes that she doesn't need and may well have trouble passing that could set her back. So those are all arguments to be made for them to pay for the private school option, even though it's much more expensive than the public school option. And again, you don't have to figure out all those arguments, because if you call Disability Rights California, we'll help you work through that. Okay, next slide. Okay, so Anna here wants to work as a chef, and the local vocational schools do not offer this type of training. There is, however, a private training program near her home that does offer the training. Will Anna need to pay for some of her training? Well, it sounds like Anna's got a good argument for them to pay for all of her training at the private program, because the public option is not available to her nearby. She can't get the training that way. She shouldn't be forced to move to wherever they have it, but she can get it nearby. So those are arguments that she would make for public or for this private training program, even if it's more expensive. All right, next slide. Justin needs an associate's degree in order to work as a web developer. Due to his disability, he needs to go to a school that has small class sizes. This one also comes up a lot. The local community college has large classes. There is a private school where the classes are only 10 students. Justin thinks the private school would better meet his needs. Do you think Justin is eligible for private school funding? This one's a little bit tricky because they don't like to pay more money just for smaller classes, because everybody tends to do better in smaller class sizes. So what you're looking at is does your disability require the smaller class size? So you're going to want to talk to doctors. You're going to want to try to show from your past academic record, like what happened when you were in bigger or smaller classes in the past, whether you took other classes in college or in high school or wherever you took classes. Any information you can have about how that class size is really crucial to your ability to do well in this program will help you to be able to argue to get the private school funding, smaller class sizes, where you're more likely to be successful. Next slide. Okay, so now we talked to the DOR, DWC. They are paying for you to go to college, so you're showing up at college. Everything's great, right? Here you are. Well, one thing that we find is that they don't prepare people for how different the university setting is from K through 12 school. So if you're coming from like graduating from high school and going into college, you've probably gone through years and years where you never had to put in new medical records because you had an assessment done way back when, could have been, longer ago than you can even really remember. And that paperwork has followed you as they've tried different accommodations in your classroom and different things, and 504 plans and IEPs. The schools hold on to those records, and they're required to meet with you regularly, and you talk about what's working and what's not working, and you have goals, and you have a whole team of people that are helping you to be successful, and it's very standardized. So it happens, and the school is responsible for making it happen. Then you get to the university and suddenly the school isn't responsible for anything. They don't even have any records that you have a disability, never mind what it is or what you might need to succeed in school. So one of the first things we see is people that are struggling in school, frustrated with it, but they didn't realize that they had to go through a whole process to get the accommodations that kind of happened for them in school before. So all public colleges and universities must provide reasonable accommodations in their classes and services. This is according to the American with Disabilities Act and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, and in their student housing and dorms under California's Fair Employment and Housing Act. So public colleges, by definition, take public funding, so they have to do that regardless. However, also private universities have to do that because under Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, it says any institution that takes public funds. And since these institutions take student loan money from the federal government, grant money, research grants, different things like that, and participate in different programs where they get funding from the state and federal sources, then they are required to follow those same laws, even though they are not publicly funded. They're privately funded, but they do take public funding. So even if you're at a private university, they have to follow these laws. So you want to look at both the physical layout of the campus and the classrooms and what you need for the classes you'll be taking to see if there are any accommodations that you need. Okay, next slide. So first you're looking if you have physical disabilities or even if you have other disabilities where it could be a problem, you want to look at architectural barriers. This happens a lot where if you the obvious example is if you are in a wheelchair and you need to be able to have wheelchair access, but it can have other things as well. Sometimes it has to do with access for other equipment. Sometimes it has to do with, for example, if you have a lot of sensitivities or if you have like temperature sensitivities or chemical sensitivities, then you may be looking at that. It could be just your, like, for example, I have some mobility issues and I can get vertigo at different times. So if I'm on a staircase that doesn't have rails, I'm going to have a really hard time getting up and down those stairs to go to class because I never know when I'm going to have a dizzy spell and I need to be able to hold on to something or fall down, and I don't want to fall down on concrete steps. So it's not always the obvious things that require you to have accessibility, physical accessibility, and not have architectural barriers. Architectural barriers just means barriers that are in the building of the building or the area. But it's required that architectural barriers must be removed where readily achievable, even in these old buildings that were built long before the ADA was passed. Or if it's able to be carried out without much difficulty or expense, which usually comes down to finances. Flavia, did you have a question?
So sorry, Paula, for interrupt. I just want to check the interpretation in Spanish because I'm reading that some people are having issues. So, Gabriel, if you can check your microphone, would be amazing. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry for interrupting.
No problem. I'd rather you interrupt than people not be able to understand. So maybe give a minute and maybe have people put in the chat if they can hear better now.
Would be
Is it good?
amazing. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, just let me know when we're ready to keep going.
Sorry, I'm going to speak in Spanish. Para las
No problem.
personas que están escuchando en español, si alguien nos puede avisar en el chat, si se escucha bien, sería muy una ayuda muy grande. Muchas gracias. If we want, we can continue, and I will move to the interpretation services. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. So, and all new construction or alterations made after 2010 must comply with ADA standards for accessible design. So this is not just in the building, it's also in any dorms that are on the campus. So you want to be looking to make sure you have accessibility. So it could also be like in the showers or restrooms in the dorms. It could be in the stairs outside the dorms. It could be whether there's an elevator inside the building to be able to get up and down. If they don't have to remove the barrier because it's prior to 2010 and it's an expensive fix, you can still ask for accommodations like moving to a different dorm or a different classroom that's more accessible to you. So think about problem solving and how you can get access to a dorm room and a classroom that meets your needs. We've also seen a lot of issues where there are classes that are built on hills, and sometimes whether it has to do with your personal stamina or your equipment, mobility equipment, it can be difficult to access if you have to go up a hill or down a hill. So, but it is really it's really difficult and expensive to flatten out those hills. But there's been a lot of success in having either assistance to, for example, help you get up and down the hill. Some campuses have provided like golf cart ride kinds of situations, or they have provided housing and classrooms that are more compatible. Either, they're both at the bottom end of the hill, or, both at the top end of the hill, or at least like trying to give you the best options possible. So just think about different ways to solve that problem. Next slide. Service animals and emotional support animals. This comes up all the time. I have a service dog myself, so this is near and dear to my heart. Service animals can go anywhere on campus that the handler may go. The service animal, which would be a dog or a miniature horse, is individually trained to do work or perform tasks for the handler with a disability, and the tasks must be related to the handler's disabilities. That's the standard for it to be a service dog. Okay. The school can only ask if the animal is required because of a disability and what work or task the animal has been trained to perform. Now, if the task that the animal performs for you is to make you feel better or feel more confident, they're going to call it an emotional support animal and not a service dog. On the other hand, if your dog is trained to perform certain tasks, like my dog, for example, will do a cover where it will come and lean on its weight on my arteries and my thighs if I'm having a panic attack, that is physiologically proven to calm you down. And it's something that the dog has been trained to do for me. It's not just having the dog that makes me feel better. The dog's doing something for me. My dog also, through smell, it's wild. I don't know exactly how it works. He can smell when I'm going to have a dizzy spell, when the vertigo spell is coming on, which is amazing to me. So he alerts me, he boops me with his nose when I am going to have a dizzy spell coming on and can't get myself in a place where I'm not afraid of falling. So those are things that the dog is trained to do specifically for me, for my disability. And he does really make me feel good as well, but those are tasks that are trained. Okay. Now, emotional support animals are allowed. So if your dog isn't trained to do anything specific, but just really helps your anxiety, your depression, and that is absolutely proven that dogs are very good for a lot of things, they can be emotional support animals. And in California, they're allowed in your housing areas. And they don't have to be performed to train any tasks. They just have to be housebroken and in the handler's control. So they can't be destroying the living spaces or, going to the bathroom all over the place. They have to be in your control because they can't be biting people or jumping all over people or causing a problem, but they don't have to be trained to do anything specific. Now, on the service dogs, they also have to be trained. This is something we get a lot of questions about. They're like, my dog is trained to do these things for my disability. That still does not mean that the school has to allow your dog in your classroom or in the dorms or anywhere you go, because the dog also has to be trained to behave itself in public access. So we had a case where she was actually a professor at a college campus. Her dog was not enough in her control and the dog bit somebody. And there was an argument about whether it was the dog's fault or the person that had annoyed the dog who had caused it. But the bottom line was that dog, even though it was a legitimate service dog and provided legitimate service for this person, was banned from campus. And there was nothing she could do about that because the dog has to be rock solid in its behavior. So it has to be quietly doing its thing, not biting. There are a lot of dogs that are reactive, and it takes a lot to train a dog for public access. So just be aware of that. Some people are not aware of that. They've heard it has to be trained for tasks, but are not aware that they can also exclude your service dog because it's not trained for public access. Dogs can be trained by private people. They don't have to be trained by professional trainers, but they do have to be trained to a very high standards to be in public access. Okay. Next slide. So another thing that comes up a lot, this is probably the most common accommodation request we hear, is auxiliary aids and services. So those are things like note takers. And I'll give you a hint right now. The colleges and universities in California, probably all over, but definitely we're seeing it in California, are not wanting to pay for note takers anymore. So they will either say, like, you can get a volunteer note taker from somebody in your class, but then maybe that's not dependable because they're volunteer. Maybe they're not there or they didn't take good notes or whatever, but they won't want to pay for a note taker. A lot of them are paying for subscription to Otter and other note-taking devices. So if that's what they're doing is getting a note-taking device, that works for some things, it does not work for others. If you know it won't work for you from past experience and can prove that, go ahead and fight that. If not, try it, but just know that if that's not working well enough and you need something else, like a live person as a note taker, that you can ask for more, but you're just going to have to show why what they have provided is not enough. And they're doing that because the automated systems are less expensive. So the campus is paying for a subscription, for example, and for each user, they pay a short fee, but they're finding it costs less than paying note takers by the hour to take notes. So if you want them to pay more money, you're going to have to justify why you need something different. Okay. ASL interpreters, you can have them pay for that. There have been a lot of fights over that as well. So they might try other accommodations for you. If you need an ASL interpreter, again, if that works, that's great. But if it does not and you need an interpreter, then you have the right to go and fight to get what you need. Okay. Electronic readers, captioning systems, specialized gym equipment. What we're also seeing is a lot of tutoring and other kinds of services. And those are also problematic. Sometimes they will provide tutoring services, sometimes they won't. And like we said, sometimes the DOR will help pay for what they won't pay for. That also happens with note takers. Sometimes they'll pay for what the school won't pay for. So just be sure you're asking in both places before you give up on that if that's what you need. Next slide. Okay. Personal aids and services. So the school is not required to provide personal aids and services. There are a lot of personal aids and services that are required in K through 12 that are not required for higher education. But even if they are required for higher education, they don't have the same obligations to provide them. So things are different. In the K through 12 system, the standard is that they owe you a free and appropriate public education. In higher education, you're not owed a higher education. So then the standard is not, they are required to provide you with a free and appropriate public or free and appropriate higher education. It's, are they providing you access to the same types of education that other people without disabilities are? And so that's a whole different standard for what they do and do not have to do. So that's another thing that a lot of people don't understand. They think, well, I've had this the whole time I've been in school. It's never been a problem. Why are you giving me a problem now? It's because they're in a different world with a different standard and a different way of looking at things and a different obligations. Still doesn't hurt for you to ask for the things that you need. try to ask for them in terms that are not going to look like personal aids and services, but are going to look more like tutoring services or like accessibility issues. So for example, if you need personal assistance, but you also need somebody to help push you up hills or something in your wheelchair, maybe what you do is you ask for the assistance for accessibility of your classrooms to get up the hills, but you choose somebody for that role who can also help you with other needs that you have while you're on campus, for example, during that same time period. All right, next slide. The school is required to provide materials for educational services in accessible formats. So for example, they do have to provide reading materials in a format then you can have. It is very common now for written and audiobooks to be available, or audiobooks in formats where a text reader can read them. But it's not 100%. The other thing that happens is nowadays, I'm sorry, the sun is shining through the window at a bad place, but that should change in a little while. But another problem is that professors will add to their lectures with all kinds of things outside of the textbook. And the materials that they provide to you are often not accessible because they are not really taught or really, they don't know about accessibility issues to make sure the websites they use are accessible or the materials they use are accessible. So even if the curriculum shows a textbook and materials and everything, and you check it all out and everything's great, if you go to a lecture and your professor is using something that you find is not accessible to you, you can ask for those materials to be provided in an accessible format, and they should be doing that for you. You must be provided equal access to extracurricular and non-academic activities as well. So career services. If they don't have career services, for example, if they don't have an interpreter, an ASL interpreter at career services, they should be providing interpreter services for that so that you can get career counseling the same way everybody else can. Now, if they don't provide career services to anybody, they don't have to provide it to you. But if they provide it, then they should be providing it to you the same as everybody else, whatever accommodations they need to do that, as long as they're not too expensive or problematic in that way and undue hardship. Other activities as well. So that might be student groups or different events that happen on campus. So it's not just classes that they have to provide equal access to. Next slide. Okay, so you've decided that you need some accommodations for your university experience. And you want to know what the process is, right? So first of all, like I said, you need to know that you need to ask. They will not set up meetings for you. They will not have any of the materials that came from your schooling before. You show up and they think you're just another student needing nothing else, and you just go do your thing. So they won't have any of this, and they won't even have knowledge. They will have nothing. We have a link to our data sheet on the different standards applied to you, whether you have a disability, and what is reasonable accommodation in public, primary, and secondary education. It's a really good link in there. It's like a little fact sheet. Yeah, it's in the chat as well. Good. Okay, so you can click on that, and it really gives you a lot of information about how to figure out like what happened in your past educational life relates to what's going to happen in college. Okay, so your first step is you're going to go to, they usually call them disabled student services, although a lot of people don't like that name. So you're finding that a lot of the campuses are actually starting to call them something else. But you're looking for the offices where they provide accommodations and services for students with disabilities. They should be in the directory. If you're looking at the website, or if you're on campus in their administrative building, you should be able to ask anybody and find out where they are and get in contact with them. You need to contact them because they will not contact you. Let them know you're a student with a disability and let them know what you need. That's your first step. You may need to go back every semester as your classes, classrooms, and professors change. And as your needs change, you might have to go back several times per semester if you're trying different things as it's not working. So just be aware that that's going to be the place where you go for assistance, but it usually takes more than one visit to get it taken care of. Okay, next slide. Try to move fast for this one's my bias. Okay.
Es muy buena la información, yo no escucho muy bien. Quiero escucharlo bien.
Good. So see, this is just my halo that's shining above me now.
So sorry. It's okay. So sorry to interrupt. I'm going to stop the recording 1 second.
Okay. So when you get to the disabled student services, you can start with asking for the kind of accommodations you had in K through 12. So maybe you got extra time on tests. Maybe you had assistance like tutoring. Maybe you had interpreters, ASL interpreters. Maybe you had certain things in writing to help you, or maybe you had things that were told to you orally, or maybe you had different teaching styles that worked for you because of your disability. You can start by asking for that. But you also want to think about what you need at the new campus, because this isn't going to be a new experience that you might need with the new classroom formats and the new university format, where your dorms are, where your classes are, how the professors teach things. Think about that when you're going to talk to them about what accommodations you need. You can also ask questions because they will know how the things are different, and they work with a lot of students that are just like you coming from other schools. And you could say, these are the kinds of things I needed in high school. This is what I'm thinking I'll need here, but do you have any ideas of other things that will be helpful to me from your work with other people like me? And they might have great ideas too. All right. And then like as you start going to classes and you find you need different things, or you things are a little bit different than what you expected, you can go back and say, actually, I need to ask for something else or something different for this class, or maybe for all my classes, because I didn't realize that I would need help in these ways. Disabled Student Services is supposed to look at each client's needs on a case-by-case basis in an interactive process with professors, administrators, and students. So if they're just telling you, no, we don't do any of that, if they're being very dismissive without trying to talk to you and find some problem solving to go on, then you want to try to get them to do an interactive process, which is where you say what you need. And even if they say no, they tell you why, and maybe give you, say, like, well, what would you suggest? What could I get that might help with this? It's supposed to be a back and forth, not just a no, we don't do that. If they want to say yes, that doesn't have to go back and forth. But if they tell you a no, they should be telling you why, and they should be trying to solve the problem. And then you should be giving what input you can to try to solve that problem. Okay. You may be asked for medical documentation. This can be difficult. We find a lot of people have problems where getting medical documentation for things that were diagnosed long ago and that they're not getting regular treatment for. So, for example, for my diagnoses, like for my PTSD or something, if they want medical documentation, it's easy for me to find a doctor to do that because I'm getting ongoing treatment. But for my sister with Down syndrome, like she was diagnosed basically when she was born, like she doesn't get treatment for it. It's like, where does she get that? So then she has to figure out, where does she get that? Or if somebody has another learning disability that may have been diagnosed a long time ago and you don't even know where those medical records are, that tends to be a problem in some of these settings. So just start thinking creatively about where can you talk to your old school about what records they might have? Can you get verification from the school that this was on your IEP? Sometimes you also can use the DOR for this. Sometimes the DOR can send you for assessments to help you get what you need to show what accommodations you need. But just be prepared that they may ask you for that, and start thinking about where that might be, how you might be able to get medical documentation of that you have a disability and what accommodations you need. Okay, next slide. So on the also as part of the process, the accommodations will not be approved if they are an undue hardship, which means too difficult or too expensive, basically, usually too expensive. They shouldn't just tell you no because it's an undue hardship. They should tell you why it's an undue hardship so you can try to figure out a way around that. Sometimes they will say an undue hardship just because they don't want to pay the money, but they actually do have the money to do it. So again, try to get as much information you can as to why they're denying it or why they say it's an undue hardship. The other thing in the school setting is they can deny it if it causes a fundamental alteration to the course. Now, fundamental alteration means that it changes the class so much that it gives an unfair advantage or does not teach the same concepts. So basically what that's saying is if what you are asking for would make your experience of the class so different from everybody else in the class that it would give you an unfair advantage or would not teach you the same concepts that they're being taught, then they don't have to do that. Now, as you can imagine, fundamental alteration comes up a lot and is used a lot to deny something, because if you ask a professor who's taught a class the same way for 20 years to teach it a little bit differently or to make exceptions for someone, they very often think, well, no, that's not how I've taught this class. And if I let you do that, I have to let everybody. Well, that's too different. They tend to be, a lot of university campuses attract people who are kind of set in their ways. You know, it takes a long time to get tenure. Once you've got tenure, you don't have to make a lot of concessions to things. So you will run up against a lot of people that think everything's a fundamental alteration. Just because they say it's a fundamental alteration does not mean that it is. So again, ask why. Why are you saying it's a fundamental alteration? That also should be a case-by-case individual assessment. Question it, try to find out why. If it's not making sense to you, you can also ask, well, what can we do like that would help me but not be a fundamental alteration? If you think they really are just using fundamental alteration or undue hardship, but they can't really prove that's the case, then you might end up fighting it. But fighting these things at the higher education level are difficult to do. There aren't a lot of attorneys that do it to help you. And yet the universities have a lot of attorneys to fight you. So the more information you get in this process about why they're doing it, and the more you can try to negotiate for what you need, the better off you are. Whether you get your accommodations or whether you end up in a lawsuit and you're just proving that you were being reasonable and they were the ones that were not being reasonable. Okay. So let's say Disabled Student Services says, yep, we can do this. You've got your accommodations. We'll put it in writing. Here's your accommodations. You get these. Everything's great, right? Okay, well, then sometimes what happens is another problem pops up because Disabled Student Services says you can do it, but you have a professor that refuses to do it. So for example, I've heard this several times with recording classes, which is a little odd because these are the same professors that were recording all their classes and doing all kinds of things like that during the pandemic. But then suddenly they don't want to record their lectures, even though the student may have been given an accommodation to get recordings of the lectures because they have processing disorders. That means that they need to hear it again slower and go over it, or have their tutors hear it or whatever. That can be very difficult because in K through 12, they have a lot more control over the teachers, but at the university level, if you have a tenured professor, it's very difficult to fire him. So, or her. So if they're saying, I don't want to do it, it can be hard for Disabled Student Services to force them to do that. I go back to Disabled Student Services by all means and tell them that your professor is not doing what you need and see if they can problem solve that, because you're not going to talk your professor into it. If you try to say you need this and she's saying no, Disabled Student Services is going to have to take over because they have more power than you do. But if Disabled Student Services is saying, well, we can't make them do it and trying to throw up their hands, then start arguing to be put into another professor's class. So, okay, maybe you can't make this professor do it, but I still should have the right to get the accommodations I need for this subject. What other professors can I take this course from that will give these accommodations? So don't just stop if you get that roadblock. It can be a difficult roadblock, but there can be ways around it. When it gets so bad, and this has been some things where we've had DOR clients where they have been having such a hard time getting their accommodations, and it has such a detrimental effect on their classwork, that then has been the catalyst that allows them to get private education. So we had someone that was in this program, their professor was very ableist, was making all kinds of rude remarks about their disability. It was a psychiatric disability that they were going by stigma instead of reality. They were making things very difficult for this person. They were not getting the accommodations they were supposed to have, and then they're failing classes. And they were afraid that the DOR was going to stop paying for school because you're supposed to keep your classes up and pass your classes. So they called DRC, and we were able to advocate to say, look, the problem isn't that they are the student. The problem is that the school is not giving the accommodations that even they agreed that they would need. But there were no other professors that taught that class, so there was no way to get around it within that school. That became a big part of the basis for arguing to get this student into a private program that he actually wanted from the beginning because he knew it would be a better program for him. He ended up in that private program and did phenomenally well. So it was actually proven that it was not he was not the problem. It was the school setup that was the problem. So again, if you're working with your school to get things resolved as much as possible, and then you're also hooking up with the Department of Rehabilitation and other services to try to problem solve what other ways you can get around it, there can be all kinds of creative ways that you get what you need, but we want to make sure that you know all these different avenues that you can follow to try to get what you need, because we want you to be able to get the education that you deserve and go off and get the job that you deserve and go be happy doing the things that you want to do, just like everybody has the right to do, disability or not. Okay. All right, but make sure, just going back to that one a little bit, make sure you work this out as soon as there are any problems, because a lot of times, especially people with disabilities, like you don't want to like make waves, and you're kind of nervous in the university setting, and professors are kind of gruff or have a lot of power. And you're like, well, maybe I can just make this work. Even if you're going to try to make it work, go to your professor in disability services and say, I will try, but I'm afraid this is going to be a problem. I'm willing to try, but I'm telling you right now that I'm supposed to have these accommodations. I'm not getting them. I'll try this, but I'm putting you on notice that I'm not sure it'll work. And then keep in touch with them. Because what we don't like to see is that you're not fighting it until you're so far behind, until there's very little that you can do. And it's a lot harder. So even, for example, if you're failing a class, it's easier for you to get a withdrawal and deal with that on your record than if you get too far, or, you know, to drop the class or something. Or if you get too far and it's a fail, trying to not only get your accommodations, but reverse that fail on your record and get your grades back on track is much harder. So it's very understandable to say, I'm going to try to make this work. I'm going to try to do it. I don't want to make waves. But that's against your interest. You don't have to be obnoxious about it, but you do need to go on record as saying, like, hey, I just want you to know I'm not getting what I need. I'm going to try it, but we need to be looking at other options in case this doesn't work. And don't give it a try for too long before you're back in there saying, look, this just is not working. I'm struggling and I'm afraid I'm going to fail my classes. And it's not even my fault. It's because I can't get the accommodations that you even agreed that I needed. Make sure you keep having that conversation. That also will be very helpful if you do end up in a lawsuit, because it'll show that you've done everything you can. It's not you, it's the school that was the problem, because they will try to point out that you didn't do enough. All right, next slide. Okay, I think I already went over this, but sometimes you'll get an accommodation approved, but a professor will refuse to do it. Talk to disabled student services right away so something can be worked out before you're too far behind. They might be able to get the professor to accommodate you, or they might be able to get you to a different class with a different professor or a different classroom setup that will work for you. Or they might be able to get some other way to get recordings or notes from that class or something. Okay. Next slide. All right, so we have some resources like the Disability Discrimination Fact Sheet on colleges and universities and educational and training services through the California Department of Rehabilitation Fact Sheet. Those are some resources for you. And next slide should be our contact information, I think. The next slide. Yes. So if you need help, you can call our intake line. So we have our intake line and our website. That's help with Department of Rehabilitation Services or help with accommodations. And we will tell you what assistance that we can give you and try to answer any questions that you have. Okay, that's the end of my presentation, but we have time for questions if people have questions.